This is what comes of blood for blood, Hector.
It's been 10 years since Breaking Bad came out, and we still have no answers about one of TV's greatest villains, Gustavo Fring. Fast food owner by day, massive corporate drug lord by night. But who exactly was he before he came to America?
If I can't find any trace of you before 89, I seriously doubt
The Malmedius.
can.
Shut up, kid, because we're gonna analyze everything Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul has to offer. Just call me Walt Jr., because it's time to open the door on this mystery once and for all. Hello everyone, it's the Malmedius back again with another video where today we're gonna see what came first, the Chicken Man or the Egghead Meth Cook. For those of you who haven't seen Breaking Bad, let me just say it's one of my favorite TV shows I've ever seen, second only to SpongeBob. It follows Walter White as he abandons his average, ordinary life as a chemistry teacher, just getting by to support his family, and starts a life of crime selling methamphetamine. As he plunges further and further down the criminal underworld, he ends up facing bigger and badder villains as they all try and fight for control over the meth market. One of the most interesting villains in the series is Gus Fring, the Chicken Man. While he may look like just an average, ordinary fast food owner on the surface level, in reality, he's one of the most cold and calculating meth kingpins in North America, always staying 10 steps ahead of anyone who crosses him. He's a man of pure focus. And while he is very pragmatic and professional, he's not above killing anyone who gets in his way. What's captivated everyone since the first episode he was revealed was that you can never tell what exactly his motivations are. He's like a grandmaster playing this big game of chess where everyone else is just a piece on the board. Meanwhile, he's overseeing everything and pitting people against each other for his own nefarious goals. We would eventually learn that he originally worked with a chemist, Maximino Arciniega, before he was killed by the Mexican cartel at the hands of Hector Salamanca. He would also work with German businessman Peter Schuler to build the drug empire and mobilize its resources through the parent company Madrigal. And he would need to recruit another chemist after Max's death, and he eventually got Gail Bedecker as a reliable chemist. However, for most of the time he's on screen, we never actually have an idea of what his true goals are, or who exactly Gustavo Fring is or was. And for most of the series, we would have no reason to really think any deeper about Gus or his past, until Season 4, Episode 8 of Breaking Bad, when Gus is interrogated by the DEA.
I mean, what do we know about Gustavo Fring, huh? This whole friend of law enforcement thing? Could be a case of keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Now, as we'd expect from his character so far, Gus is able to masterfully avoid any suspicion and distance himself from any drug-related activities. But then, out of nowhere, Hank drops his bombshell of a question.
Is Gustavo Fring your real name?
Look at that reaction. With one question, Gus is taken aback. You can see his fake, good guy persona melt away for a moment. We see his cold killer expression shine through. But then Gus quickly gains his composure and pushes back at the question, to which Hank elaborates.
I know you're a Chilean national, but there are no records of you ever living there.
Really?
With one short conversation, all the different media and film theorists started speculating about Gus's mysterious past. And with the start of Better Call Saul, many people thought these questions would be answered. But after watching through all of Better Call Saul, It honestly just ended up raising more questions than answers. However, I've done the research. I've rewatched everything, looking at every scene for the answers, and I believe there's just enough breadcrumbs left by the writers for us to make a fairly accurate Gustavo Fring timeline. Now, as we discuss this, I'm going to lay out my mentality as we go along, but a lot of this is just speculation from bits and pieces in the series. So please leave your suggestions or theories in the comments below. I really do read every one of them. So in making this timeline, let's start off with the hard and fast dates, where everything else can be worked around. First off, let's go back to that interrogation scene and see exactly what Gus says.
15 years ago, I established a chemistry scholarship at UNM. Gail was a recipient of this scholarship.
And Mr. Bedecker graduated in
1999. I know you're a Chilean national, but records show that you immigrated to Mexico in 1986, and then a couple years later you were granted an entry visa to the United States.
Now let's take this interview point by point. The Better Call Saul prequel takes place around the early 2000s, and Breaking Bad takes place in the late 2000s, with this DEA interview taking place in 2009. 15 years ago, when he established the scholarship, it would have been 1994. Gail Bedecker, who was trained to eventually become Gus's chief meth chemist, graduated in 1999 from UNM, and Gustavo Fring moved to Mexico in 1986, and then moved to the US in an unspecified year. We also learn when the company Madrigal is investigated by the DEA for its connections to Gus's empire, that Peter Schuler was hired by the company in 1992.
I hired Peter Schuler in 1992.
Now, believe it or not, these are the only hard-fast dates that the show gives us related to Gus's past. And that's what makes patching together Gus's history so frustrating, yet so enjoyable. Of course, as a Chilean, Gus lived through the rule of dictator Pinochet. And while this itself doesn't mean anything, there are a number of points through the show where a deeper connection to this government is hinted at. During the DEA interrogation, Gus cites Pinochet's regime as the reason there's no records of him in Chile.
General Pinochet's government was guilty of a great many sins. First and foremost were its human rights abuses.
When the Mexican cartel discusses whether or not they should give Gus an audience, Hector Salamanca refers to Gus as a generalissimo, or grand general of an army.
Gran hombre, gran generalísimo, gran cocinero es más parecido.
Additionally, when the cartel kills Max, Don Eladio tells Gus that the only reason they spared him is because they know who he is.
Pero entiéndeme bien, ya no estás en Chile.
Presumably referring to what he did in Chile. Now, either you paid attention in world history class, or you're like me and have no idea who Pinochet was, but could probably piece together that he was a bad guy when Gus says he did some human rights abuses. Now, if you're like me, I don't like human rights abuses too much, so I thought something was pretty sus when Gus mentioned that. So to catch everyone up, General Pinochet was a man of not much notoriety for most of his life. All he wanted was to be a general, even from a very young age. And then, against all odds, the first ever Marxist president to be democratically elected in Latin America became the president in Chile, President Salvador Allende. Now, Pinochet really had nothing to do with anything, with any regime, until a Nixon CIA plotted to take out the president. When some members of the military tried to stage a coup, Pinochet rallied behind the president. Pinochet was somehow promoted to be the next in line to be head of the Chilean army, mainly because he was so loyal to the Constitution and the government. But then, literally 2 weeks later, he joined another coup attempt, and on September 11th, 1973, a military junta overthrew the government. Not only did the military junta start erasing political parties and getting rid of any leftists in the country, but soon after, on June 27, 1974, Pinochet became the sole president of Chile and the junta disbanded. The military was brutal, ruthlessly killing anyone who opposed it, and set up concentration camps all throughout the country, one of the worst being right at the capital of Santiago, the Villa Grimaldi. Now, some might ask, why did the world turn a blind eye to these atrocities? Well, not only was the West very happy because a Marxist was overthrown, but Chile's economy also had an unprecedented boom soon after the new government took over. This was called the Miracle of Chile, as deemed by economist Milton Friedman, due to Chile's new laissez-faire attitude towards capitalism. And a lot of companies were drawn to Chile to get some of these perks. But we'll get to all that later. So now that we've got some of the history out of the way, we can start speculating and filling in everything else. So let's start at the very beginning. No one knows exactly when Gus Fring was born. Even the fandom wiki says he was born in 1958. When I saw that, I was like, what? How? Now, I'm not that big-brained, but I doubt I would have missed that. I rewatched this series like 3 times looking for this info. Well, it turns out the wiki was just using the actor Giancarlo Esposito's age to estimate Gus's age. Now, I don't know about that, Chief. I mean, by that same logic, Jesse Pinkman goes from his 20s to his 40s back to his 20s, all in these 2 scenes. But, I mean, to be fair, Bryan Cranston was 51 while playing Walter White, who was 50, so it's the best info we've got for right now, so I'll let it slide. So considering this birth year, we know that Gus was born into a poor family in an unnamed village and had some unnamed brothers and a mother. When Gus visits a sick Hector and tells him a sinister story, nice. He explains that he was able to grow a lucuma tree when he was 7, and he was even able to sell some of these fruits at the local market. However, one day, Gus comes back and finds that the tree was ransacked by a coati. Fueled by revenge, Gus waited all night to trap the animal, and instead of killing it, he kept it alive and tortured it. Even at this young age, revenge is able to overtake him and turn him into a vessel of pure focus. We know that by the time Gus was even involved in the cartel, he was already well known as some high-ranking military official. However, when he immigrated to Mexico in '86, he'd only be 28, which is way too young in my estimation to be a big general. He could have been born way earlier, but let's try to look at it from a different perspective. We know that Gus has a lot of history in Santiago, the capital of Chile. So much so that this is mentioned twice in Better Call Saul and once in Breaking Bad.
Santiago.
So we can assume that if Gus joins the military when he turned 18, he could very well have worked at the Via Grimaldi, which, as you remember, was in the capital city, Santiago. Here in the Via Grimaldi, it was the Chilean secret police force that worked at the detention site, and about 4,500 people were detained and tortured, with at least 226 people having been disappeared. And we know from everything the series tells us that Gus has a knack for torture, and this in with the secret police may have been Gus's in with the Chilean military. The Chilean secret police was called DINA, and it worked with many dictatorships to eliminate any leftist in South America, a vicious plan deemed Operation Condor. This large international work could be how the cartel comes to know of Gus's true identity later on, and why he is eventually spared at the hands of Don Eladio. Anyway, at some point before he moves to Mexico, he befriends Maximino Arciniega. Max would come to describe it as Gus saving him from the slums of Santiago. Together they would partner up and realize that there is an untapped drug market up north. Possibly through some connections with the secret police, Gus partners with Max and begins establishing himself in the criminal underworld, with Max becoming trained in chemistry to be able to produce a very potent methamphetamine, unlike that anywhere in North America. And this partnership would eventually blossom into an undying glove. Gus presumably uses his military connections to erase any record of him having ever existed in Chile. Then he changes his name and moves into Mexico in 1986. And here is where he would start his first ever Pollos Hermanos restaurant, a fried chicken joint that he would use as a front to sell meth. However, the cartel soon catches wind of this operation, and we see a phone call about them discussing whether or not to invite Gus and Max into their operation. Hector would end the call by saying,
Nunca confíes en un sudaca. Sucia, sucia gente.
Right after this, Gus and Max are given an audience with the cartel. As punishment for dealing drugs without the cartel's permission, Hector shoots and kills Max, right next to Gus. It was over in a second. And Gus is only spared because the cartel knows about his involvement in the Chilean military and his activity in DINA. And they warn him that he's not in Chile anymore, so his status won't protect him. Now Gus is fueled by revenge. From now until the rest of the series, he wants to kill every last one of the cartel leaders for what they did to Max, and he wants to torture Hector for pulling the trigger. From this point on, Gus is a cold, calculating machine built on hate. He expands Los Pollos Hermanos to America and finds Gale Boetticher to be his meth chemist. Gale spends some time in UNM to get his bachelor's degree, and then spends more time getting his master's in organic chemistry in the University of Colorado.
I received my bachelor's degree from UNM, my master's from the University of Colorado, organic chemistry with a specialty.
X-ray crystallography.
And he was gonna do his doctorate there too, but then he quit and decided to go headfirst into the more prestigious profession of being a drug lord. So at this point, we're entering the Better Call Saul timeline, where Gus destroys the Salamanca's hold on North American territory while building up his own Pollos Hermanos chain. But do you remember what I said at the start of the video? And with the start of Better Call Saul, many people thought these questions would be answered. But after watching through all of Better Call Saul, it honestly just ended up raising more questions than answers. That big question raised in Better Call Saul was what exactly happened in Santiago. This is mentioned twice. Once when Lalo confronts Gus about his secret construction operation and starts talking to Juan Bolsa on the side.
Todo es negocio. Como lo que pasó en Santiago, eso también era negocio.
And once when Gus tries to calm down Peter Schuler.
Do you remember Santiago? The two of us, our backs to the wall. I will never forget what you did.
So what can we learn from this? First off, this Santiago event must have happened after 1986, since the cartel has some idea as to what happened. The way Lalo describes it too, he uses it as an example of Gus acting out of pure emotion and hatred, instead of just purely business, which implies that this must have occurred after Max's death. We can conclude the same thing by looking at the way Gus talks about it with Peter.
Our backs to the wall.
Our backs to the wall. This implies you and me, Peter. If Max was there at the time, you'd think it would be important enough to mention. But then, how does Peter Schuler fit up in all this? If he was hired in 1992 by Madrigal, which if you remember was mentioned during the DEA interrogation of the board of Madrigal, what business would he have in Chile? Shouldn't he still be in Germany? And besides, Gus still has to go to America, expand his fast food front, and establish a scholarship all in the 90s. And even if Gus and Peter met right away, would you follow a man you just met into the drug business and risk everything you've built? I don't think so. So when did both Gus and Peter Schuler possibly go to Santiago? Well, let's go back to the 80s. Remember, this is where a lot of economic growth happened in Chile, and a lot of countries wanted a piece of that miracle of Chile. So Peter most likely went to Santiago looking to make a good business over there. He ended up meeting Gus and Max right as they started planning out a drug front business. So I suspect Gus ended up befriending Peter and helped him establish a very successful fast food chain in Mexico. This way, Peter could join Madrigal in 1992 and immediately start expanding the Pollos Hermanos chain into America. So when considering all this, I suspect Santiago incident happened before Gus's permanent immigration to America and before Peter was even hired by Madrigal, but crucially after Max's death. So this Santiago incident must have happened in 1991. After Max's death, the cartel still chose to work with Gus for distribution. They can't deny the pull of Gus's little operation. I mean, he was able to convince their men to take his drugs after all. While they didn't like the product he was selling, they knew that the Chicken Man's front could be used for their product. San Juan would be the one to supervise that side of the business and to make sure that Gus doesn't step out of line ever again. Gus was working with San Juan and the cartel, yes, but he was still making his own moves, even this early on. These were the people who killed Max after all, and he had to make sure that this business never dies, even if some of these people would have to die in his wake. He knew that to build this business that he dreamed of, he had to work with Peter Schuler, who would help expand the operation into the US, allowing the movement of drugs freely into North America. And importantly, The cartel would never have knowledge of Schuler's involvement, as he was never mentioned by anyone in the cartel at any point in the future. Even when Lalo goes to Germany to try to destroy Gus's operation from within, he has no idea that one of the central figures linking Gus to his desires to break off and go on his own was right there in Germany the whole time. So as far as the cartel knows, Gus is expanding this business on his own. But before Gus and Peter can finally commit to the moves in America, they have to make one last trip to Santiago and make sure everything is in order. And while it's impossible to imagine exactly what happened, this is my interpretation of Santiago. Peter and Gus both go to Santiago to erase any connection they ever had with the drug roots. They need to make sure that nothing connects them to Pinochet's regime or the drug gangs that they used to work with.
Man, so much has changed. You remember this place, Gustavo?
Only too well.
At this point, Gus has already destroyed any files connecting him to the atrocities committed under Pinochet's regime. Some previous access to classified documents is all he needed, no questions asked. But now they were here to get rid of the gangs that got them into this business in the first place. The only people who could possibly connect the dots years in the future and bring them both in a world of trouble. They walk through the slums of Santiago, the same slums where Gus met Max for the first time, the slums that changed by the sands of time. Rain continues to fall, and the night moon gets obscured by the clouds. Finally, they get to that old familiar spot, the place where Gus was introduced to the drug trade, where military officers who worked under him would buy drugs for their own use. He knows that the gang is still here. He knows that to move forward in the future, he has to kill the past.
There it is.
They see the safe house for the drug gang. They sneak in, quiet, as to not set off any alarms. They continue to walk into the darkness, into a labyrinth of hallways. Ever cautious, a guard could be around any turn. Finally, they turn to see a makeshift drug lab. All amateurish at best, nowhere near the scale they both plan to build in America. And as they looked around, Gus stops. He spots it. One of the pieces of lab equipment has a name etched into it. Max.
Gustavo, take it easy.
They took one of ours.
Gustavo, please.
They took him away.
Gus spiraled into a fury of rage. Just as this happened, a guard walks into the lab. Before he could do anything, Gus turns around and shoots the man in the darkness. 2 shots, and he was dead. Gus standing over the bloodied body. Now everyone was on high alert. As more guards poured in, Gus and Peter split up in the confusion. Gus ducks for cover and tries to hold his position, but it's too much. The gang comes at him at all sides. Gus is pinned down. He sprays a few shots around the corner, knowing that they were closing in on him. Even his undying rage couldn't keep him alive for long. But across the lab, on the other side, was Peter. He knew what had to be done. Their backs to the wall. They had no way out. He took out his gun and aimed at the chemical barrels on the wall. 1 shot. Gus and Peter made it out and left the lab burning in ashes. They would make their way up to the gang's leader's office, and while Gus began to burn away any papers or money that he saw, Peter made quick work to unlock a safe under the desk. There were some papers in that safe, some assurance the gang leader would have in the event that he ever got caught in a pinch. Now those papers were burning with the rest of it. Gus and Peter leave, having erased that last connection that they had to Chile. Now they could start moving into America and create the largest drug empire the world has ever seen. As they turned away, returning to the darkness from that bright orange glow, 1 or 2 gang members would get away, fleeing desperately. Now these little thugs had no idea who did this, but they would quickly spread the news of how a drug gang was burned to the ground single-handedly. And as this news started to spread in the criminal underworld, only a few people who ever even knew of the Chicken Man, who knew of his true origins, would ever be able to piece together that this was the work of Gus Fring. Years later, one cartel member would realize that this was not fueled by pragmatism. This was fueled by his own personal vendetta. Only he would come to suspect that this burning anger deep inside Fring would never be satisfied until the whole cartel was burned to the ground. Now, of course, this can't be proven, but it's something fun to think about. I'm not a storyteller by any means, so please let me know what you guys think actually happened in Santiago. Now, that basically covers it for the timeline. We would continue to see everything happen in Better Call Saul and into Breaking Bad. We see that Gus's fury would never let him find peace until his mission was completed. And then we finally see it. In Breaking Bad, he's able to complete his goals. But even despite this, there is one last scene that's confused Breaking Bad fans, including myself, for years.
Come on. You can help me cook. This is a Chilean dish that I love, but I never get to make it. Kids won't eat it. But you know how that is.
Does Gus have kids? Where does that fit into the timeline? Well, in short, I don't think so. Not only do we never see any sign of kids aside from this one scene, but we've also established Gus to be a master manipulator at this point in the series. So I think this was just a way to try to be relatable to Walt. To be like, see, I can be a drug kingpin and still have my family. You can too, buddy. Remember, Gus not only knows that Walt has cancer, but also knows that he's really new to the game. So he's trying to present this life in the best possible light in order to keep Walt working for him. At least until Gale Boetticher comes of age. So no, I don't think Gus has a family. I think he's only in this for revenge. And we can even see this in Better Call Saul, that he refuses to settle down until his revenge is complete. So with all that said, this is the complete Gus Fring timeline. But yeah, it's been a while, so I'll tell you what, if you liked this video, I'll make you a deal. Go watch this video about Nacho, and if you like that one too, you might as well subscribe. You can always change your mind later, after all. I'm the Malmadius, and as always, have a great day, and make it a great day for someone else. Until next time.